Welcome back to Sprague Homestead. So I'm Nikki, and I wanted to give you guys an update on kind of a new project that I'm trying. As most of you know, as the weather gets kind of nasty outside, I get stir crazy pretty quick. So I start a lot of weird little house projects. And one thing that I started doing, I went ahead and dug up my bell peppers this year. Some of you know that I got the garden in really late this year for 2021 because Kane and I got really sick for over a month with what we think was COVID. So because of that, my peppers got put in late. We did get some, but they were pretty small. And I started reading a really interesting article where somebody was talking about the fact that bell peppers actually have a lifespan of 2 to 3 years. Now, for the most part, we tend to think of these guys as kind of annuals. Because in most areas of the country, they won't survive over the winter. They don't do real well under about 35 degrees. So I got to thinking about this, and especially with a really short growing season like ours, how cool would it be if I could keep these bell peppers going all winter long and then move them outside during the nice months? I should have a much better pepper yield next year. Now, I also read just this morning that some pepper varieties, if they're cared for correctly, will actually live up to 10 years. Now, I'm not this optimistic because my green thumb is not exactly the emerald green that you would hope for. But so far, these guys are doing really well. So I dug them out of the garden, like I said, and potted them up, brought them in the house. The pots that they're in right now are kind of small, because I was waiting to see if they were going to make it. Some of them had already taken some frost damage, and let me show you. You can see this poor guy here had already gotten some frost damage, and so he's shedding some leaves and having some issues. But although it dropped a lot of its new buds, it is still growing a pepper, and this pepper was a little bit smaller when I first brought it in, and you can actually see there's several peppers on this plant. Most of the plants have at least 1 or 2 peppers, and they're still growing. So now that they've kind of stabilized, I'm probably going to bring in some bigger pots and get them repotted up a size. I just wasn't real sure if this late in the season, if the shock was going to be too much for them or not. We do have the grow lights on them. I'm running the grow lights about 14 hours a day, which is kind of the bare minimum of what they need. But the foliage that's starting to grow in is looking really good. I've got some fresh growth on some of the smaller pepper plants. I'm actually getting some new buds and some new blooms on some of the other ones. So I'm really optimistic that this is going to work. The big problem that I ran into was when we moved them inside, we got aphids. And this happens to me almost every time that I move garden plants from outside into the house. I did pick up some neem oil, went ahead and sprayed them off, and it looks like we are getting them under control. I also went ahead and dug up my pineapple sage, and I brought her in and 3 different basil plants. And if you've ever grown basil or sage in the house, you know that they are troopers, no problem. The pineapple sage has only been in about 2 weeks, and she's already doubled in size. So she's more than happy to be in here. Pineapple sage really doesn't like the cold, so it was struggling a little bit for the last month or so. So I'm going to keep these guys going and just see. I do have some extra room here in the sunroom. I would expect that these guys are going to get pretty big. At least that's the hope. But here in the sunroom, I've got a whole nother bank of windows on the other side. I can drop some grow lights down from the ceiling if I need to, and probably will as they get really going. I know the camera is probably having all different kinds of color issues because of the grow lights, but yeah, so I'm going to try these. Now, supposedly you can do the same thing with tomatoes. I didn't get my tomatoes moved in time, and honestly, the plants were just too freaking big to try it with. But I usually don't start my tomato plant until February here. And I'm going to go ahead and get some seeds started probably in the next couple weeks, and we're going to try it. What is the worst that can happen? If I can get my plants up big enough, even if I'm not trying to pollinate them in the house to get them to actually yield, if I can at least get the plants big enough that when we go to move them outside in the spring for the nice weather, we should get some actual good yield. And for us here, that is huge. All right, so there you go. That is my new wintertime project, is trying to grow peppers in the house. if you have suggestions for me, feel free to leave them down in the comments. This is all kind of new to me, and I'll be honest, I'm usually an outdoor grower, not a whole lot of indoor growing. So we're just going to kind of see how it goes. And that is it for tonight from Spraguer Homestead. We will see you next time. Happy homesteading!